Welcome to this panel, to this mental health panel with us whole being ambassadors. I'm here with Cal, Cat, and Sierra. And I just want to start by saying that it is an honor and a privilege to be sitting in this safe space where we can voice our stories. So, with that, let's start by introducing ourselves. My name is Mina Marie Anglero. I am 26 years old. I was born and raised in Oslo, Norway, with a Norwegian mom and Puerto Rican dad. And since age 5, I was an athlete. That is where I received my recognition and achievements. And that came with its pros and cons. And I have served or represented Norway in both basketball and track and field. I ran for Cal, UC Berkeley, and currently also working for Athletes for Hope as a consultant. So I will just pass it off to Cal.
Hello, everybody. My name is Calamia. My pronouns are he or they. And I grew up in Grayslake, Illinois, in the Midwest, and now live in San Francisco, California, where things are different. And that's been really life-saving for me as not only a queer athlete, but also a trans person. And I'm living in a place where I can access the care that I need to thrive and be happy. I love soccer and boxing, but my primary sport is endurance running. So I do marathons and ultra marathons. And I do a lot of activist work in the space to make it more inclusive for trans and non binary runners. Very excited to be here with you all. Who would like to go next? Yeah, go for it, Kat.
I'm Cat Salladin. My pronouns are she, they. I grew up in Yorba Linda, California. I was a swimmer from age 6 till last year when I medically retired. I was on the U.S. national team in 2017 in open water, and I competed at the I competed at World Championships in 2017 in the 25K. I now am a therapist and licensed social worker, and I enjoy working with neurodivergent people and athletes.
Awesome. I'll finish it off. My name is Sierra Enge. I use she, her pronouns. I grew up in San Diego. I have a big family and played a bunch of sports, but kind of stuck with soccer at a pretty young age and have been playing it ever since. So I played soccer at Stanford University for 5 years. I stayed there and did my master's there. And then am currently playing professionally for the San Diego Waves. So I actually got to move home and be close to my family, which has been awesome. But yeah, I'm just excited to share this space with you guys and have a good conversation.
Agreed. Thank you. So we have different questions. The prompt is let's just read out the question, and whoever wants to answer the given question, just do it, okay? So the first question is on our personal journeys. So, with your personal story, can you share your personal journey with mental health? For example, what were some key challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
I can start. I've struggled with mental health my whole life. I found out that I was autistic last year, and looking back, that had a very big impact on my mental health, but I didn't know it my whole athletic career. So I dealt with a lot of anxiety and depression, especially after I had my big success of my national team stint that was short-lived and unexpected, but yeah, I dealt with it in a variety of different ways, some helpful and some unhelpful. And I think that the biggest thing that helped my mental health journey was like deconstructing my identity as an athlete and kind of understanding that I was more than just an athlete. And that definitely took place more after I retired than during my time as an athlete. But yeah, I feel like there were a lot of different things that impacted my mental health.
Thank you for sharing. And that's like a huge relief for to actually be given a diagnosis and knowing how to go from there. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else who wants to share?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think I was actually just talking about this with a couple other soccer players last night, and we were kind of just talking about how there's a certain shift when you're playing a sport. And it happens at a different stage for everyone, but it goes from being this really fun stress reliever to something that can oftentimes actually lead to more stress and more anxiety. And so I think for me, you know, there's always struggles and challenges that you're going to face in your sport, and those kind of started to show up and impact me a little bit more when I was about 14 or 15. And so I just feel like I got really, really lucky with the people that I was surrounded with, because I was able to actually open up and share some of those things. And at Stanford, I had teammates who would come up to me and check in on me, and that was normal. And so I just feel super fortunate to have been in those environments. And I think, unfortunately, so many people haven't. And it's really easy to just get, like Kat said, what you do feels like your identity for so long. And when that's not going well, like I felt like I was a soccer player and that's it. And when soccer wasn't going well, then I was like, okay, well, who am I? And there were times where I would play poorly in a game and then not want to talk to anyone for days. And I was like, this isn't how I should be living my life. And so I think that whole idea of deconstructing your identity is so important. And it happens at different stages, but I think it's something that we all kind of need to think about, because our identity is so much more than the sport we play or the thing that we do.
I completely agree. And I feel like you bring up a lot of good topics, but one being that when and if people are looking into being a student athlete, look at what services are the universities or colleges that they're looking at providing. So thank you for sharing that. Going off of that, just also sharing the good sides of sports and then how it can contradict itself. That when I was 16, my brother was diagnosed with cancer, and the only thing I knew that I could control, or where something I could do for him, I could play for him, that was sports. And so that's what sports became, almost this unhealthy relationship where I was receiving accomplishments and also where I felt like I could actually be of some kind of service or help. And it took me far, and I went to UC Berkeley, but then he was diagnosed with cancer again. And this time sports was not enough. And I didn't want to run anymore. And Cal, you mentioned how running is freeing. It's a liberating feeling. But when I lost that freedom of the running is free, it's for me, I lost myself. And so rather than using the word mental health, I use the word disconnect, because I really see it as a disconnect within ourselves and not really knowing who we are. And so, Sierra, you mentioned identity, and I really just also completely agree with that. And if I stop running, who was I then? And so I'm playing back and forth up until this point. Am I going to continue to run? But that scary part of, okay, if I'm letting go, who am I then? But what has helped is, okay, if I am not an athlete, what other interests do I have? And to dare to explore them, and to know that, okay, if I'm not delivering in sports, what other gratifications could I receive? So, Cal, do you have anything to say, or we can go to the next question if you don't?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to share. And sorry, my dog is kind of barking because
We
the
love
electrician
dogs.
is here. But anyway, yeah. So very like a lot of what everyone said really resonated with me, and I think like as a young person trying to understand and navigate my own identity in a community where there wasn't a lot of representation for me, I think that like that might sort of be the catalyst of what made me feel like I was really struggling with my mental health. Around the same time, middle school, high school, I remember being in health class and watching a video about depression and what it was. And I was like, oh my God, I think that's me. And it was kind of a journey from there of developing coping skills, developing, yeah, like specifically space for me to reflect and think about directions moving forward that will make me feel best and build a support network of people that are checking in on me. And then when I went and ran in college, I think there were, I don't know if this applies to other folks or not, but there were a lot of pressures on body image and running on the women's team back then, pre-transition, especially in running, that I've noticed, and probably in most NCAA sports, unfortunately, there was, we were body fat tested and, just trying to be a young college person, like trying to make it work and be my healthiest self without necessarily the familial support or access to resources to eat a certain way or whatever, it was really challenging. And so again, thinking about identity, thinking about sitting at the intersection of where you come from and whether or not you have familial support, and how class intersects with that, and how resources are also, lack of resources rather, can be unfortunately a contributor to mental health struggles. And then a lot of, for me, I moved to California and realized that I was trans. I started to transition and I started to feel so much better. So a lot of thinking about resources, thinking about representation, a lot of what I feel like many of us struggle with from a mental health perspective is like not having the language and not having the tools to understand what we're struggling with, much less how to move forward in a way that helps us actually feel better. But again, community, I think, has been really, really big, and also renegotiating my relationship with my sport so that it feels detached from some of those pressures around body image and the like.
Thank you for everything you just shared. Like, that is literally great words, and I feel like you will also be a great educator in this space to come with. So I do hope that you continue to be in this intersection of mental health. Okay, next question, you guys. Mental health and athletics. So when it comes to injury and recovery, how has dealing with injuries impacted your mental health? And what strategies did you use to stay positive during this recovery? So anyone who wants to start?
I can start. Oh, you go ahead.
Everyone.
Okay. I can start. I think, funnily enough, injuries in my career have actually come at times where I've almost needed a break from the sport and almost have put too much pressure on myself. In high school, I tore my ACL, and that was kind of around the time where soccer just felt like everything to me. And I think actually removing it, like, even though it was really hard, was what was best for me and my mental health. And going back to our conversation earlier about identity of like, okay, now that I am still a soccer player, but now that I'm not, training every day, like, what is my identity and what am I doing? And so I think something for me, honestly, that I found to just be really helpful during injuries is pouring into that part of yourself that's not the athlete, and like really learning about things that you're interested in and things that you're passionate about completely outside of the athletic space. So I started reading a lot. I started learning a lot more about meditation and kind of became interested in that. And so I kind of found that to be something that was really helpful for me in terms of my overall mental health and also getting through the injury, because I kind of realized that, like, okay, I am going to work really hard and I'm going to do everything I can to get back, but I'm also going to have these other things that bring me joy, because training for me like brings me joy. And when I don't have that, I'm like, okay, well, what are other things that I can do to kind of help fill my cup and contribute to just my overall well-being.
I can go next. I have dealt with quite a few injuries / illnesses over the years. My first injury, well, it was at the same time as I got really severely overtrained right after my 25K. My coach had been making me swim like 5 hours a day, and it was literally insane. And, looking back, I was 17 at the time. I didn't know any better, but I had a really bad shoulder injury as well, and it was definitely not taken seriously. It was ignored and, just experienced a lot of gaslighting and the pain that I was feeling for 2 years before I had to get surgery after the end of my freshman year of college, and I couldn't swim my freshman year because of the overtraining in my shoulder. And I started to get a lot better after that. It was a really, really hard time, but I think it was really just focusing on why I wanted to swim in the first place and that I loved swimming. And it really kind of forced me to realize that, like, even if I never had success again, I still wanted to swim. And I did finally start to get better a few years later. In 2020, right after, right before the pandemic, I was finally back to, the shape I was close to being in before. But I actually got COVID in January of 2021. And ever since then, I've had long COVID. And that has been a huge, huge, life-changing experience. That's what made me have to retire. It's what, it really kind of was, it really was the thing that ended my Olympic dreams and just my goals of getting back on the national team and really ever swimming fast again. And I kind of had to come to terms with the fact that, when I was at my last dual meet and when I was training, I could barely function outside of swimming, and I wasn't functioning in the pool either. I wasn't swimming well at all. And it got to the point where after practice, I would be struggling to walk upstairs, or I would be falling asleep on the floor of the locker room. It was really bad. And I was forced to reassess my identity in my sport and in what I wanted out of it. And I mean, I'm still grieving, definitely, but yeah, it's still a work in progress for sure of coming to terms with my new body. And yeah, I think the chronic illness and the injuries are definitely something that, impact your mental health a lot. And it's hard to not be really depressed when you're in that situation. So
thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm thinking, as we're sharing our stories, we've gone through so much, and how we are able to relate with so many people in so many different areas with those experiences. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I don't have much to tack on here. I feel like what was shared was so impactful, and I just want to kind of echo, I think I tore my ACL recently, 2 years ago, and it was horrible. It was horrible, and I was in so much pain, and also couldn't use my typical coping mechanism, which is running. And I completely agree with what Sierra said around just I started to frame it for myself as I'm gonna tap into not just things that can distract me, but more the other things that I know I'm interested in, that I know I'm passionate about, that are so often neglected by the hustle and bustle and grind of being an athlete at an elite level. So I think yeah, getting into reading, getting into writing, trying painting, what are the other things that you feel like you don't have time for, and what can you discover about yourself through those new hobbies, so to speak.
That was literally what I was going to say. Just the importance of removing ourselves from the locker room, from the field, those comfort spaces, and exploring. For me right now, I'm dealing with a half broken ankle, but then allowing myself to take in nature or explore my ancestral history, being here in Puerto Rico, enjoying new food, enjoying food, learning to re-enjoy food again, traveling. So we're just reinforcing each other right now. Okay. Next question in regards to stigma and barriers. So, seeking help. What advice do you have for athletes who are struggling with mental health but are hesitant to seeking help?
I would say that I feel like a lot of times there's this idea of the whole purpose of getting help is to be better at your sport or to perform better, especially in athletics. And I think my advice would be just to remember the entirety of your life. And sports is such a small portion of your life. It's a blip on the rest of your life. And your mental health is forever. So, I mean, it's not to like scare people into wanting to like get help, but it's also kind of like, you know, it's a good thing to get help before you're going to be dealing with mental health challenges for longer than you would be if you had, you know, sought help in the first place. And just like, I mean, it's scary to get help, but it's also really, really worth it when you find that person who can support you and who can help you process the things you've been through.
Thank you.
Mhm.
But it's so hard, right? And it
Mhm.
comes back to what Cal was talking about with the lack of tools and language.
Yeah.
And we
Mhm.
see the increase of numbers of death by suicides among athletes, and how we don't even have that language or space to go to. So I thank you for saying that. And I was going to kind of reiterate what you were saying in the sense of the importance of actually honoring the situation that you are in, like be it middle school or high school or college, like take advantage of being a part of the events that are going on right now. Like when I think back to college, I think about those few times I said yes to like being a bad athlete and doing something fun,
Mhm.
or just being a normal human being.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
truly the encounters with people and situations that we do learn about this world and ourselves. And it is scary to let go, but having fun and the other side, it's so fun.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I would tack on too, just like that you can't show up and perform as an athlete if you can't show up as a person. Like that's just factual information, and we know that all sports are mental games. If you're feeling incredibly anxious or incredibly depressed, it's going to be really hard to show up and like nail that swim or like do what you need to do on the field. So I think like that's really important, and I've learned also from my time as an educator that like the most important the key to life is actually taking care of yourself, actually, because every single layer of life builds from that place. Like if you yourself can't take care of yourself, it's really hard to show up for your friends and your family and your loved ones and your teammates, right? And then if that can't happen, then it's really hard to show up for your community and do like this kind of work where we're trying to make the world a better place for other people. So it really does start with the self, and like and but at the same time, using and leaning on people that you can trust, that care for you, is probably the most important thing you could do if you're feeling like you're in that place of like, I want to reach out, I think I need help, but I don't know what to do. Like having someone who's like, I'm here on this journey with you and I will help you and support you through that is um, it's great for you because it's a little bit less of a lift for yourself, but it's also some accountability where when someone else knows what's going on, they can help you hold that a little bit. And I think we all need that. Like getting through a deep mental health struggle on your own would be incredibly challenging to do. So really leaning into at least one trusted person, I think, can make a really big difference.
Exactly. We just need that one person.
Yeah, I think everything you guys have said is perfect. I think going off of that one person thing, I think it is really hard. And we talked about it before, but as athletes to kind of step out and ask for help, because it does kind of feel like, it's a sign of weakness, which
Mhm.
it isn't, but I understand why people feel that way, and I understand why people are really hesitant. And I think I would just say too, like, when I started going to therapy, I was like, oh, it's like this, you sit on the couch and you process, like everything from, like, you have to start with your childhood and go, like, it's not, therapy takes so many different shapes and forms, and you can find some form of therapy that you really like and that you think helps you. And I 100% believe that, like, there is a type and a person that can help you for, like, literally every single person. And so I would really like experiment and figure it out. And if you go see someone and you're like, I don't like this, go look for other things. Like, I really truly believe in talking to someone else. You can't get through anything on your own. And so, like, do the work to help, because it's really will have incredible long-term effects.
I completely agree. And in that exploration period, if you don't want to start with therapy, try exploring who would be that one person. Ask some questions. Try to test people around you, either it be family or friends or a coach. Just test. You don't have to share your whole story. Just try.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is strategies and tools. So, in regards to coping mechanisms, what coping mechanisms or self care practices have you found most effective for maintaining your mental health? Kind of speaking to what Cal just said with the importance of the self, too.
For me, I've always been a writer. I love writing. It's been my aside from swimming, it's been my biggest other passion in life. And I've been, just writing about my experience as an athlete. And I want to write a book someday, but right now it's just me processing everything. And I think even if you're not like a good writer or whatever, like writing out how you feel, or even just like speaking into your phone, like your emotions, is hugely beneficial in just like getting it out of your system. So
let us know when you publish.
Yeah.
I also, I'm certainly not as good of a writer as it sounds like you are, but I journal, and that has been honestly like the biggest thing for me. I started journaling when I was really young, but I did it like once a year just to be like, oh, here's like my highlights. And I've recently gotten into journaling pretty much every day or pretty consistently. And I think for me, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate and a lot of athletes can relate, like a lot of times like try to keep things inside or rationalize things, or, be like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna, something bad happens and I'm just not going to show any emotion, and I'm going to show up every day and I'm going to have a good attitude and a smile on my face. And that's exhausting. And I really find that when I write, and I'm writing in a journal that only I can see, like I just let everything go and I can release all the emotions and everything that's going on. And also sometimes get clarity on situations. Like sometimes I might be feeling super emotional about something, and then as I'm writing, be like, oh, okay, like I now have a better idea of how I want to handle this or whatever. So journaling has been huge for me. And I recommend it to everyone, because I do think like you don't have to be a good writer. You don't even have to write in whole sentences. You can literally just write whatever comes to your mind, and it helps to just get everything out.
I agree.
Couldn't agree more. That's it right there. That's the money. I mean, like same exact thing. I like, yeah, exactly. We're done. Bye everyone. But yeah, I feel like writing is, I feel the exact same way. I think especially with athletes, like high performance athletes that are like taking their sport very seriously, like we have a tendency to be very regimented and very busy and like be, need to keep moving, keep training, keep going. And I feel like the like journaling and stopping and writing is just like the antithesis to that. It's like, no, we're actually going to address how we feel for a moment, and see what's there, because life is challenging. And if we're not like making space for those challenging feelings, then they're going to come up in ways that are a lot less healthy. So sort of like teasing through some of those feelings a little bit at a time has definitely been the most helpful for me too. And I tend to be like, I take work very seriously, and I take training very seriously and my athletic career. So I think like trying to somehow, and it's really hard for me, but trying to speak my own language around what rest looks like and what downtime looks like. Like I've really struggled with the word rest for some reason. So I just call it recovery, because recovery seems more active and it seems like it's actually going to lead to something better. Right. And like, I've learned as an endurance runner too, that like rest is as important as any training you could do. And that's probably true for most sports. So like, if I can change my mind a little bit about how I view rest and how I view downtime, and make it something that actually works for me and feels like it's supporting my growth, then I'm like speaking my own language. So that's been something that's been helpful for me as well.
Amazing. I hope people are taking notes. These are great tips. Thank you for sharing. The last thing I would say is just, I've been, how athletes, we want to optimize everything and do the best, the best like self-care tips. So I would like Google all the best self-care. And today there's so many. And I would always find myself just in nature. So nature to me, I'm drawn to nature. So being in nature, alone or not, is just truly, it's amazing how Mother Earth continues to provide every day. But that's another topic. And then the last thing is people. I'm 26, so it's taken me this long time to actually dare to share my deepest and most painfulest feelings. But as I've done that, I've received the most and deepest love that I didn't even expect. And so it's been so hard and so scary. You don't want to be a burden to anyone, but for me, truly using people and almost having like a dyadic journaling for me has been truly transformational. And you say you used the phrase, Cal, earlier. You said saved me, and that is truly one of the self-care tips that has saved me. So last question, even though I'm loving this conversation, is future directions. So in regards to changing the narrative, what changes would you like to see in the sports industry and or athletic programs approach to mental health?
I have a lot of opinions on this. We talked about this for a while. I had horrible experiences with mental health support in both on the national team and in college. And I think one of the biggest things I saw was just that the focus on mental health treatment was always just on the performance of the sport. Like there was no trauma-informed practice. There was no therapy that was like, what are we going to actually talk about how like your anxiety is actually rooted in something that happened in your childhood and is actually like related to your sport, but it's also to do with things that you experienced outside your sport. And those holistic approaches like more important to the actual whole well-being of an athlete rather than just trying to like put a band-aid on it and do sports psychology and just focus on just like getting better enough just to get you performing well again. Like I think that colleges, like a lot of times they don't even have a therapist who like will work with athletes on that. And if they do, they're like full all the time. And yeah, another thing I also think is just like finding out that I was neurodivergent, like changed the game for me. And I think there's a lot of neurodivergent athletes out there who are not getting the support they need and might not even know that they're neurodivergent. And I think that offering those types of assessments and services and a neurodiversity affirming approach for mental health support is crucial because like I think that there's a lot of athletes who again like would fall in that neurodivergent world because of just the way sports are and like how much dedication you have to put into it. Like I think there's a very high percentage of athletes who are neurodivergent in some way. So that's another aspect that I think is very important to, in the future, implement in mental health support in athletes.
Amazing. Thank you. I love learning. So thank you for sharing this.
Okay, I could tack on a little bit. I totally agree with much of what was just said. And thank you, Kat. Like that identity piece is really important. And like we could look at a number of different identities and come up to the same conclusion that like if there isn't conversation and if there isn't like legitimate diversity and representation in this sport or in the sporting world at large, it's very easy to feel isolated as like you're the one person on your team dealing with XYZ. And so like I think at large, people who have power in the athletic world taking intentional steps to support diversifying sports in general. Specifically, like I must mention the like number of anti-trans laws that have gone into effect that are, forcing trans athletes out of sports, as children. So I think like doing the actual work to ensure that like spaces are not only safe and inclusive, but that we are actually like able to see ourselves reflected in athletics, right? So like, yeah, I mean, right now I think the dichotomy that exists for trans folks is like you're either trans or you're an athlete. Like being a trans athlete is a no, right? Like that's the world that we're looking at. And if you look at some of the mental health outcomes, you know, we all could probably agree that mental health and physical health are deeply related. And when you have a good relationship with your chosen movement, it's really good for your mental health. So if you have entire demographics, and it's not just trans folks, right? Like even looking at folks of color underrepresented in certain sports, things like that, or women underrepresented in certain sports, neurodivergent folks, like the list goes on and on and on. But when you have demographics of folks that are excluded from participation in physical activity, that to me is a public health crisis. That is a not just a physical health crisis, but a mental health crisis. You know, none of us want to be told that we can't move in a way that makes us feel good because of who we are. So I think doing legitimate work to diversify the sport and to you know, hire consultants and hire folks onto your teams to ensure that your organization is doing that work is paramount right now. And it will have impacts that are beyond what we could even imagine for improved physical and mental health outcomes for all of us.
Yeah. I had another thought jumping off of that, if that's okay. You mentioned just like the authority figures and like the people at the top, and I think it really does start with them. And I think there's a huge issue with coaches being emotionally abusive. I have experienced multiple coaches who were just absolutely awful to me. And the power of the athlete is very much diminished when you try to report that type of behavior and you're met with disbelief or gaslighting and nothing changes, and coaches still get renewed of contracts, and you're seeing the cycle of, you know, your teammates getting emotionally abused and you tried to do something about it and nothing changed. And yeah, so it's so much of like teaching coaches that like a lot of the things that they're doing is completely outdated and unacceptable, and holding those coaches accountable for the actions that they do that cause athletes to feel unsafe on their teams, whether it be through discrimination or through emotional abuse and manipulation and things like that. I think there just needs to be more accountability with bigger institutions.
I agree.
I was going to say too, something that I think is kind of funny in a way, that's also not funny, is that, you know, as athletes, you're constantly being evaluated, right? Like your coach is constantly evaluating you and making judgments and letting you know, like, hey, this is what you need to get better at. This is what you need to, you know, really improve on, or like, this is what you're really good at. And there's just not that same evaluation for coaches. And at any level, like so I agree with what you guys have said. I think that there just needs to be more talk, especially at a young age, about like, hey, like, how are you doing? And I think sometimes people are wary of like bringing that conversation on too early. And I'm like, no, it's important that we talk about and give people an opportunity to express their feelings and really learn, like, how do I talk about my mental and emotional well-being? Like, how do I have these kind of conversations? And so I think that needs to start just at a younger age, and there needs to be more access to therapy. It's like, it's ridiculously expensive to go see a therapist. And if you're playing, like, in my dream world, like every youth sports program would have some sort of access to a therapist that people can use. And colleges would have way more therapists because, yeah, like everyone I'm sure has experience, like there's far too few and way too many athletes that really could use the help. And I think the last thing that you guys have touched on too that I would just bring up is people in positions of power can have so much influence, and all it takes is a little conversation. Like, it doesn't need to be something so drastic. It can really just be like, hey, I want to check in. How are you doing? Or for me, like when someone comes up and shares something vulnerable with me, I feel so much more comfortable opening up to other people. So maybe going up to someone and just being like, look, I'm having a hard time. This is hard. And just seeing what presents itself. I think the more that we can have those conversations, just the better our society and our mental health will be.
I agree. Thank you. And you say society, and to Cal, what you were saying, and Kat, like, it is a societal problem. That's what it becomes with the isolation and with the lack of education. And I literally like wrote my master's thesis on the problem of collegiate athletics, but focusing on also what can be improved. And I love the word holistic. I think, Cal, you brought up the word holistic. And we are, in some form or another, we are a mind, body, and a spirit and emotions. And to account for that and to allow a space for also inner work. As athletes, we're taught to pound our bodies, the body aspect. But what about ourselves? Like, we're not taught how to use our inner selves, our breath, for instance. And all of this, I'm very drawn to like the ancient wisdom and traditions, and they held some form of knowledge. But it also comes down to the power, like advocating for change. When I was in college, when it comes to the athletic system, like it has to come from the top. And it all starts with education too. So amazing, you guys. Do you have any last words that you would like to share before we close off?
Maybe just hang in there. Like if folks are struggling with their own mental health, hang in there. It can get better and it will get better. I think like again, like many of us mentioned and kind of hammered home, like rely on at least one person around you and don't feel like you need to keep what you're dealing with to yourself. Like let someone else hold a little piece of that with you. And yeah, if you're holding someone else's stuff, then also, feel like you can refer that if it becomes too much for you, right? Like it does sometimes take a village to move through some of these struggles. So yeah, I understand it can be complicated and nuanced, but trying to only hold what you can hold, and when you can't hold it, ask for help, and don't feel ashamed to do so if you can manage.
Yeah. And just reiterating what you said, Cal, about the importance of rest, I think like that was the number one thing that I didn't do and I didn't know. Like if I had rested, maybe I wouldn't have gotten overtrained. And if I had rested, maybe my mental health would have been better. And I think so many people, like most athletes, are just expected to just, like you said, just pound your body into the ground and hope for the best. But like rest is literally just as important, if not more important, than your like intense training. So yeah, listen to your body and don't let coaches tell you that you don't deserve rest, because you do.
I think that's great. Let's end on that. That was awesome. Really bad.
Amazing. Yeah, and thank you to Athletes for Hope for also creating this space. And just to the people out there, just don't give up, because life is a roller coaster and a journey, but it's worth it. So thank you, everyone.